you could please join your palms. Together we recite Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear it and uphold it. And I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. This is where we are in the Amida Sutra, the nadir direction, which is downward, and we've been talking about the meanings of the Lion Buddha. And again, the Lion Buddha represents strength and confidence in propagating the truth. And for us, in order for us to support that, we have to understand what the truth is. And fundamentally, there are three pillars to Buddhism: the the Buddha Jew, the Dharma Jews, and the Sangha Jew. And let's continue with the Dharma Jew. The Dharma Jew here, just quick review. What is the Dharma? The Dharma has many meanings. We've talked about it meaning the reality that the Buddha experienced, the expressions of the Buddha's experience. So what he experienced is reality. What he experienced and what he expounded essentially were the same, because what he realized was the truth. So this truth here is a realization. It's not imagination. It's not something that is not attainable, but it's a realization. So it is real in the sense that it could be attained. And it's not just somebody's imagination or somebody's feelings, but it's an experience. It's not a mundane experience, and we'll go into that. It's just not a normal kind of experience like your experience, your coffee being hot or your iced coffee being cold. That's not what this experience here means. And we'll go into that a little bit. It also means the truth, the law, the principles, or reality, or it could mean, in general case, just any kind of phenomenon, whether it's physical, mental, spiritual, or transcendental. So you can see the meaning of the word Dharma is vast. It can also mean idea, an object. Like, for example, you think about something. When I hit a bell, you have an image of a bell in your mind. So that is Dharma. That's that image in your mind. Although you don't see it, you cannot touch it, you cannot feel it, but you can see it. It's in your mind, and so that's also called Dharma, or a state of existence. Okay. And then lastly, the last part of it is, what did the Buddha realize? Well, the Buddha realized reality. And in that reality, there are many components, including dukkha, dissatisfaction, impermanence, emptiness of the self, individual self, egoless, okay? And liberation. We talked about the liberations, and we talked also about nirvana. And then today we're going to talk about the mystery of the void which will wrap up the sections on the Dharma. So the mystery of the void. According to Shankaracita in his book, What is the Dharma? So Buddhism has its mysteries too. Many other religions have their own mysteries. Buddhism also has its so-called mystery, because the concept of the void is so difficult to understand, and it is, although it sounds simple, it can be easily misunderstood, and it can lead a practitioner down the wrong path. And so it's important that we understand the mystery of the void and understand the concept of the void so that we can avoid the pitfalls. So we learn from those who have proceeded before us, and we are grateful for those who have succeeded and also those who have failed, so that we can learn and that we can avoid the pitfalls ourselves, and that we can help others to avoid such pitfalls. Because it is really a pity, after a lifetime of cultivation, the hardships, the hard work you put in, and at the end, you realize you walk down the wrong path. And most people, they don't realize they walk down the wrong path because they think they're on the right path, but at the end, it is the wrong path because they just end up with suffering. For example, they end up with, when they have misunderstood the meaning of void. They think there's nothing to be had, so therefore there's no need to put in efforts to cultivate merits, to cultivate wisdom. And so at the end, when they have exhausted their merits, their arrogance arises, and that leads them down the wrong path. And that's not bad enough, though. What's even worse is that they lead other people along with them, and other people start to believe their achievement for something real. And so it's like the blind leading the blind. So we should be very careful with this wonderful concept. It is wonderful, but at the same time, it's a double-edged sword, because one, it can make a person complacent and stop advancing, or it can lead to greatness. So we study this concept, not that because we have fully understood it, but because out of respect for the Dharma, out of respect for the truth, that we wholeheartedly, with respect and reverence, that we're learning this subject. So we're hoping that we are learning it correctly and properly. And so we pray to the Buddha and Bodhisattvas to help us on this journey, that we will not encounter pitfalls, that we could avoid them. And so this is a wonderful concept, and we should study the concept, but we should study with just to make sure that we're careful what we're absorbing. So it is a mystery because it's very difficult to understand, but we will try our best to understand what we can, and we'll leverage the learnings, understanding of those who have preceded before us. Okay, so he says that perhaps the greatest of them, this mystery, is the one that represents most uncompromisingly and essentially incommunicable experience. This void called sunyata, or voidness or emptiness, is something that cannot be conveyed using language, human language, to communicate with others. And sometimes it could be interpreted as nothingness, but these are just words that we're trying to explain what this experience is, but until we experience it, it's very difficult. And so that's why we cannot just base on words, but we have to read the meanings between the words to understand what is it that the Buddha is trying to convey. So one could even translate as zero, nothing, right? But zero in a mathematical sense is sunya. So sunyata is a deep mystery. So again, just a sunyata here, just let me zoom in, so make sure we're on the same level playing field here, that when we're using these terms, we're throwing these terms around, make sure that we understand what we're talking about. So sunyata means voidness, or 空性, 性空, or 空单. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about sunyata. So this whole topic is about voidness, okay? Sunyata is a deep mystery, not just because of its abstruse theory or difficult doctrine. It's a mystery because it's not a theory or doctrine of philosophy at all. It's really a transcendental experience. That's why it's so difficult to communicate. It's not like a mathematical formula that anybody can see and understand. And even difficult formulas, you ponder long enough, you will understand this concept. But this is something that is not easy to convey, just like to say that the water that I'm drinking is warm. I can tell you it's 85 degrees, 90 degrees, and what, hot or warm. But unless you experience this, you cannot say that you have understood it. And that's what it's trying to say here. So one might even say that it's not just a mystery. It's a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. So it's like a mystery inside of a mystery. So emptiness is just the words that we use to label an experience, either a spiritual or even a transcendental experience. And there's really no way of using the human language to describe it, because it goes beyond the human language, the mind. It goes beyond the sixth sense. And it's mystery because it's incommunicable. We speak of sunyata of voidness as though it were a doctrine, a theory, a philosophy, and nothing more than that. And this is a catastrophic mistake. And so again, here we mentioned that this realization is not just imagination. For the enlightened, their experience is their realization, is their expression, and that's their reality. What they say is their reality. For example, in the Zen tradition, there were many teachers or Zen masters in the past. When they realized something, they express their realization in terms of poems. They can say, for example, they can say that what they realize is to break through emptiness or to break through the air, or to be able to scratch the surface of the sun or the moon. To us, those are just great poems, but they don't mean anything to us. But that's how they realize and they express it in terms of poems. That's how they see things. And so until we experience it, it's very difficult to communicate. This is undeniably a doctrine of sunyata, even a theory or philosophy of sunyata. But these conceptual formulations are only used simply for purposes of communication between the enlightened, those who have achieved the experience of sunyata, and the unenlightened, the mundane folks who have not had such experience. So it is just a tool to communicate. So historically, the Buddha's communication of his experience to his immediate disciples is an example of that, designating the truth of the Buddha's experience. And so these so-called doctrines, philosophy, are just components of the raft, like the raft, your raft down the river. You're on the raft, you're just using as a tool to get you from one side to the other. It's not meant to be the end, but it's a means to the end. So its sole purpose is to take us across the waters of birth and death, across the samsara, to the shore of nirvana. So this is just a tool for us to get to the shore. And so they are means to an end, not ends in themselves. So we should not be attached to the word. Some people say, it's not nothingness. You cannot say it's nothingness. How can it be nothingness? Well, we don't have to argue. It's just ways to try to communicate what it is. And there's something that must always be borne in mind when studying Buddhism. And so this is something we should understand, that this is just a tool. Right? So I have a little note here to say, so we should really avoid the two extremes. One is to think that it's not a doctrine, but only an experience, and its nature is empty, nothing, and it must be of no value. So that's an extreme that we should avoid. One must respect the teaching and the teacher in order to become the teachers, right? We want to experience transcendentally. We have to respect and have reverence for the doctrines that we're learning. The other extreme that we should avoid is to think it is such a complex and sophisticated doctrine, and we try to learn it so that we could be better intellectually, so that we could have a better argument with other folks. It's so that we could explain it more, to explain it better than others. And so that leads to attachment. One is say it is nothing. The Buddha say it's nothing. We should and think of it as no value. The other one is attached to the language that is being described in and becomes attached to it. So for the unenlightened, it is a safer route to have respect for the teaching and to take it step by step. If we think that this doctrine is of no value because it's empty, it's nothing, because Buddha says at the end it's nothing, then we will not benefit from it. It is only nothing once you have achieved it. Just like, for example, you say, I don't care about money. Well, there are two, let's say two people. One, really, they have nothing on them. They don't have any money on them. One person says, I don't care about money. Money is not important. The other person says too, money is not important. But if it was a poor person saying money is not important, then it's very difficult to believe what he's saying. But a person who has given up all his wealth to say money is not important, it means differently, right? So before we have achieved the state of the transcendental being, we can't say the doctrines, those things are not important. We have to have respect for them. So before, for a person to say money is not important, it is that statement has value only he has achieved wealth and willing to give away to help others, right? That means more than a person who has lost his money through gambling and now trying to justify his state of being, saying money is not important. So two different, same way of saying it, but has two different meanings. It must be said that for something that is so essentially a matter of experience, Sunyata has been the subject of extraordinary wealth and depth of Buddhist literary treatment. So even though this word is nothing, but there have been so many books written about it. In fact, those scriptures devoted to the investigation of Sunyata, known as the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So this is Order, Jing, or Kinh Bát Nhã. So that's a very popular set of sutras. So altogether represent probably the most important single body of Mahayana canonical literature. So there are 30-odd perfections of wisdom sutras in all. The most famous of them are the Diamond Sutra, the Heart Sutras. So those are Kim Cang Bồ Lỗ Mi Jing, Kim Cang Bát Nhã Ba La Mật Kinh. Those are very important sutras in the Mahayana tradition. All of these sutras deal basically with just one topic, sunyata, emptiness, right, voidness. They all deal with it in basically the same way, not logically, not metaphysically, but as direct spiritual experience. So these texts, these scriptures, in the form of discourses given by the Buddha, who speaks out of the depths of his own transcendental experience. So when the Buddha gave these discourses, they were given from his transcendental experience, his realization of the truth. So they are called perfections of wisdom sutras because it is by means of spiritual faculty of the perfections of wisdom, prajna, that the truth of sunyata is perceived. So prajna means wisdom, bodha, or bhajna. So again, these terms are not commonly used, so we just want to point them out so that we have on the same level playing field so when we talk about this topic. So the perfection of wisdom represents the subjective pole. Sunyata, or emptiness, voidness, is the objective pole, and of what is essentially the same non-dual experience. So perfection wisdom. Wisdom is subject, how you perceive, and void is object. So one is object is you yourself, and object and subject is what you're facing. So the perfection of wisdom is void, and there's no duality between subject and object. So once you have achieved that level, according to sutras, there is no differentiation, no duality. Right now, we do have that duality because we have not yet achieved that. So we see that the void is something that is not us and is different from us. And so therefore, it causes duality. But at the ultimate level, there is no duality. So, however, it would be a mistake to imagine that because we are talking about an experience, we are dealing with something simple, mundane, ordinary. What we call sunyata consists of a whole vast of spectrum of experiences. just like the white light that we see, it consists all the lights in the spectrum. So it's not just, so although it's white, we cannot see it, may look empty, but in reality it consists of all the lights in the spectrum, the light spectrum. So Tibetan monks should be able to rattle off the names of these no less than 32 kinds of sunyata. So there are many names associated with this. So although there's only one concept, sunyata, but there are many names associated with it. So there are many translations to sunyata: emptiness, a suchness, authentic, limit of reality, absence of marks, absolute, Dharma nature, hidden potentials, and so forth. So there are many, many names associated with this concept. Large enough. So there are many terms for sunyata. It is because to avoid creating a fixed form of something that is not, which can lead to attachment. So that's the whole point of why there's so many translations, because it's not a single thing. When we look at something, it's not just one perspective, but different perspective will see things differently. And so because this is a whole spectrum of things, not so like just like the white light, you cannot say it's red or green, it's all the colors. But to say what we're seeing, this white light is red and somebody else is green, they're not correct, but they're not incorrect, because it's there, but it's not, because that whole spectrum of light consists of all the light. So they're partially right. And so we cannot say that it's void, it's empty, because it can lead to misunderstanding, but there is nothing to be had. So void is not nothing, nor is it something permanent. It's neither annihilation nor externalism, existentialism. Voidness means anything can happen based on conditions. Given the right conditions, form will be created out of voidness. Form turns into voidness under the proper conditions. So voidness, you can say, is really conditionality. One way to understand voidness, the sunyata, is conditionality. So you cannot say it's there permanently, because when the conditions are no longer true, that the phenomena is no longer there. But once you provide sufficient criteria, form will be created. So for example, a person feeling sad and depressed, so he can't just wish his sadness away and have immediate happiness. You can't just, because there are conditions why he is sad. So he cannot just wish that is away, even though it's empty, but he cannot just wish it away. So, but if he follows the formula of joy in the four immeasurables, 无量心, 诸无lượng tâm, he will understand the condition for joys are loving kindness and compassion. Right? Loving kindness, compassion will lead to joy. And if you want to go beyond that, then you have to proceed to the next step, which is tranquility, 舍, Loving kindness is to help alleviate the sufferings and fear of others via the three kinds of giving. Right? The three kinds of giving are giving of wealth, giving of knowledge or Dharma, giving of fearlessness. Compassion is to help them to become empowered so that they can achieve joy and success on their own. So one is you first have to eliminate the suffering and then teach them how to obtain joy. Because in the midst of the suffering, you cannot introduce the law of cause and effect. They won't be able to absorb that. But once their life is stable, now you can introduce the Dharma, the principles, and that is compassion, so that they themselves can be empowered to improve themselves. So when the conditions of loving kindness and compassion are met, joy will naturally come to fruition. We don't have to search for joy. We don't have to chase after joy. Joy naturally comes, just like when you yell inside a cave, an echo comes back. When you yell, I hate you, hate will comes back to you. But when you say, I loved you, then love naturally comes back to you. But you need to have a cave. You need to have something, so a cave that can echo, environment that can echo, and you producing that sound, you will have that echo naturally. So if we want to have joy, it's very simple. Just follow the 4 immeasurables, right? So it is not about chasing joy that one can have joy. It is through providing the right conditions that one naturally feels joyful. So this is why even after a whole day of labor of volunteering to rebuild shelters for the homeless, for example, or to do beach cleanup, so you spend a whole day working away, you feel tired, but you feel delighted at the end. And that delight is not because you chase for it, you work for it, but it comes naturally because you have done something meritorious. You have done something to help others. In other words, you have exercised loving kindness and compassion. And that's why at the end of the day, you feel joyful, even though your body may be physically tired, but your mind is inspired. Your heart is inspired. So when one contributes financially or one's physical and mental efforts to make society a better place, the natural fruition that one encounters is inspiration and joy. It's just a natural arising of inspiration and joy. So there are people who are willing to risk all the resources, including their own lives, to fight for good causes, such as to save the environment, humanity, or world peace. There's no fear in that. And that is because it's not for themselves, but they're doing it because for others. So people who they're willing to risk their lives because of somebody else, and that's loving kindness and compassion. They're thinking beyond them. So their success, their courage, are really the results of the conditions of wanting others to be better, be happier. Joy and inspiration comes from serving a higher purpose of a true altruism. So that is right? That is selfless. So when we work towards something that's as a higher purpose, then that leads to just natural joy. A lower purpose is a self-serving purpose. So egoistic joy does not last, and the result is always dissatisfaction at the end. It may feel satisfied at the beginning, but at the end, it's dissatisfaction. To begin, he continues, to begin with, it is probably reasonable enough to confine ourselves to just 4 principles. So this void is vast, and so we don't have to bother ourselves with the entire spectrum of this concept. Perhaps we should we should focus on the very few that could help us understand it. And in his book, he narrows down to 4 principles, elements of this sunyata. And so, but these 4 here, not literally 4 different kinds of sunyata, right? There's not 4 different parts, but they are 4 successive stages in our experience of the mystery of the void. 4 pointings in a continuous, ever deepening experience reality. So the 4 that he introduced in his book are the voidness of the conditioned, voidness of unconditioned, the great void, and voidness of voidness. So there's a lot of voidness in here. Okay. Are any questions? Are we going to dive into any comments so far? Anything that's not clear that needs to be explained before we jumped in? Okay. All right. Okay, so next is voidness of the condition. Voidness of the conditioned. There are 4 sanatas. Samskita sanyata, emptiness of the condition. To understand this, we must appreciate the basic Buddhist distinction between conditioned reality, which is dependent upon causes and conditions, and unconditioned reality, which is not so dependent on it. So conditioned reality is existence as we know it on this earth. And it is to be recognized by the 3 fundamental characteristics. And they are unsatisfactoriness, impermanence, and void of the individuality or the self, the unchanging self. So those are the 3 fundamental characteristics. So ku, wu chang, wu wo, or kou, wo tu, wo ngã. So those are the 3 characteristics of conditioned reality. Okay, so we're using terms here that we don't normally see. So it's helped to understand what is it that he means by these terms, so-called conditioned reality. And then for the unconditioned reality has the opposite characteristics. So these are not all quite the opposite characteristics that one might expect. The first of these is straightforward enough. Unconditioned reality is supremely blissful. And I'll put in quote, blissful, and we'll go into that in a little bit. Unconditioned reality is eternal. So this characteristic should be understood not in the sense of being everlasting in time. So eternal here does not mean a very long period of time or an indefinite period of time, but in the sense of transcending time altogether. It goes beyond time. And so in order to communicate that, we just have to say eternal, because there's nothing comparable to. So for the convenience of communication, right? For a communication purpose, we call it eternal. And then third is, if the conditioned is devoid of self, then unconditioned should, of course, be characterized by self. But here, there is a difference among Buddhist schools, right? They all have different terminology, different concepts, explanation of what this self is, right? Not missing anything. So in the Theravada tradition, they believe that not only is condition devoid of self, but unconditioned nirvana is also devoid of self. So that's what Theravada traditions believe, that concept that there is no self at all whatsoever, whether it's conditioned or unconditioned, transcendental. This voidness of self is obviously not quite the same thing in both cases, but the distinction is not always made clear. Some of the Mahayana schools indeed speak of unconditioned in terms of selfhood, like the Maha-Atma, the great self. And in the Zen traditions called the truth or the real self, right? So we have different interpretations from different schools. The Theravada schools usually object strongly to this procedure and with some justification. So they have their own rationale. There is a very great and real danger of hypothesizing the self. So in other words, to break this into multiple parts, distinction substances of reality. That's what hypothesizing means. So we should not take this self and then break it into different pieces, although we can look at a different perspective, to have different interpretations, but to say this is the interpretation for it, and this is not, then that's wrong. Right? To say there's no self at all, it's wrong. But to say there is a self, that's also not complete of view. Buddhism is profound and very colorful with many schools. Like a beautiful flower with adorned petals, right? You have flowers with very adorned leaves and petals. Plucking one petal and call it the flower is not a complete picture. Although it's not entirely incorrect, but it's not complete, because that petal is part of that flower and what makes that flower beautiful. But to say one school is the ultimate purpose of Buddhism is to disintegrate and eventually destroy Buddhism, right? We start to differentiate and disintegrate Buddhism. Although we have many schools, but they say our school is the best, and our school is what the Buddha meant to be, then we are doing a disservice for Buddhism because we are disintegrating it. We are creating internal conflict, and it's not just necessary. We follow one school because it's most suitable to our interests and ability. People have different interests, different ways of practicing. So, but it's not what Buddhism is about, though. So Buddhism is not just about Pure Land. Buddhism is not just about Zen. Buddhism is not just about observing precepts, but it's all, like we talked about last time, the 7 chariots, right? From beginning to the end, right? The king, when he had a business to go to another city, there were 7 chariots prepared for him. So when he exited his palace, he took the first chariot. After the horse got tired, he moved on to the next one. And then so after a certain distance, he moved on to the 3rd one, the 4th one. Eventually, the 7th horse, the chariot, took him to the final destination. So when he was asked, which chariot did come to arrive at the destination? He said the 7th. And for those who has seen the entire picture, that would understand it. But it's all of them, right? So it's not just one chariot that took him to the final destination. Just like we have the 3-fold studies, 戒定慧, precepts, meditations, and wisdom. We cannot have meditation without precepts, and you cannot have wisdom without meditation, because if your mind is disturbed, you cannot have wisdom. So it's all that takes us there. So it's not just any one part that is the complete picture, but we partition it into different parts because for us to easy to understand and grasp, because for us to understand the entirety of Buddhism is just impossible. Therefore, Buddhism was broken into different schools to help not to disintegrate, right? Not for us to become attached to that one school and start to and disintegrate Buddhism. So we may encourage each other. Amongst our co-practitioners with praises of our own schools of practice, but we may not say that other schools are not good. So we can praise our own practice, but we should avoid saying that other schools are not better. So let's say that's the real danger of trying to separate this concept into multiple aspects and then become attached to that particular aspect because it makes sense to you, for example. Even though it might, in a sense, be quite legitimate to speak of higher or greater self, at least in a poetic way, there always remains the danger that instead of aiming at sloughing off the sense of self, one will simply be substituting oneself for another, right? Replacing comparatively gross ego with a more subtle or refined self. So we say, yeah, that's not a self, it's void of self. But by saying that, you are attached to this something called void, so you already have this formulation of something that exists of nothing. And that is wrong too. So that's what he's saying here is that when we say there's void, devoid of self, there's nothing. Well, by saying there's nothing, there is something of nothing. And so we become attached and binding to that concept, that thinking. At the same time, it is important to bear in mind that all positive predications about nirvana is necessarily analogous. None of them are to be taken literally. So all these examples, true self, true nature of Buddhahood, those are tools to communicate. So we may speak of nirvana as the supreme bliss, but it is certainly not bliss that we understand it. So we say, right, these the 3 characteristics of unconditioned reality: supreme bliss, eternity, and also the third one, the self. But these are again tools, right? So when we say about supreme bliss, we're not talking about what we think of as what we experience on a mundane level. But it's certainly not bliss, we understand it, right, by any stretch of imagination. Not even if we multiply the bliss by hundreds of thousands of times, will we even get a shadow of an idea of what it is. So we're using the term bliss here analogously, just an example, analogy. So using supreme bliss here is to try to describe something that's beyond language and thinking, just a tool. For instance, nirvana is infinite, not in terms of space and time, but it's beyond space and time. So it's difficult for the mundane mind to grasp this concept because of how the physical brain is wired and the consciousness is biased. We have this bias that's very hard to break through. For example, the mundane mind can perceive that a small object can fit inside a big container. We can accept that. It's very easy to accept. But it cannot accept a reality where a Mount Sumeru, which is supposedly the tallest, the biggest mountain in a world, can fit inside a tiny mustard seed. We cannot see that. We cannot imagine that. Right? You can imagine a drop of water inside a pool. Right? You can put a drop of water inside a pool, but you cannot put the ocean inside that drop of water. Our mind cannot perceive that because we are limited by space. Our concept of space is limited by space. We can only see one way, one direction. Right? So nirvana is independent of time, therefore it's infinite. So infinity here does not mean extremely long period of time, as it is not as a measure of time. So time is relative. We're saying a long period of time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. We're basing that on what we have come to know of time. But when, in terms of transcendental state, once you've gone beyond space-time limitation, then the only word you can use is infinite, because that's the most suitable thing you could use to try to illustrate what it is. So we should understand that these are just analogies, and we should not become attached to these analogies, and to think that infinity is really within is what we know as time and space. So by the same token, it should be possible to use the word self in the same way, right? And this is what Mahayana schools does. They don't do it very often, and when they do it very circumspectly. They also have some canonical authority for doing it. The Buddha is to be found in several Mahayana sutras speaking of nirvana as great self. For example, in this Maha Parinirvana, Pháp Niết Bàn Kinh, Kinh Đại Bác Niết Bàn. So Mahayana, Maha Atma can also be tracked down in the Pali canon. There are Theravada traditions, such as the Anguttara Nikaya. So Nikaya is what we know as Ahan Jing, but it's known as Nikaya. Right. So Nikaya, there's short discourse, middle discourse, and then there's long discourse. But it's very resourceful. So even though Theravada school does not accept the term self, but in those sutras, the Nikaya sutras, do reference Maha Atma. Atma is a self, great self. Tantras, of course, go even further than Mahayana. Not only the great self, but even the great passion and great anger. Right, appear as synonyms for enlightenment. So they use great passion. So great here doesn't mean big compared to small, but great meaning infinite, limited. So it has to be understood in a rather esoteric sense, which is Tibetan Buddhism, Tibetan practice. Such terms are employed within a certain traditionally prescribed framework or context. where they may be positively effective rather than dangerous. So when we say great passion, we don't mean there's attachment, that desire, or great anger, that there is it's anger in terms of the three poisons. But anger here, perhaps something that's associated with enlightenment. So it's more positive than dangerous. So life as we know it is conditioned reality. It is empty of the unconditioned and its attributes, the three attributes, right? Wu-tang, wu-wo, right? Dukkha, impermanence, and way of self. Bliss, permanence, true selfhood are not to be found in this world. And if we want these things, then we have to look beyond this world. Again, there's nothing to be had. Again, it's not like there's something permanent out there that we can pursue. So we have to look up to a higher dimensions of reality. The voidness of conditions is in the fact that it is void of unconditioned. Okay? So that's void of condition. Okay? Any comments so far? Questions? Void of unconditioned. So if the condition is empty of unconditioned, then what is unconditioned empty of? It's obviously unconditioned is empty of conditioned. in the unconditioned nirvana, so unconditioned here is really refers to nirvana. There is no suffering, no impermanence, no false selfhood. It is empty of these things. This is the second of the four sunyatas, voidness of unconditioned. Unconditioned is also the transcendental. So the term that we're using, unconditioned, is really transcendental. It's not worldly. Worldly is described by three characteristics. Again, dukkha, impermanence, and the void of self. The void of self here means that you cannot, there's no single element in its existence. You cannot say that because of my abilities, I have created my empire of, and that I have control of my finances, I have control of my empire. There is no control because things change, and that's the nature of it. And so that means that the void of self, there's nothing to be had that's unchangeable. And so this world is described by those three characteristics. Whereas the transcendental state of being, for the sake of communication, there is some control in a sense that is void of change. I mean, it's difficult to communicate, but I hope you understand what I mean. This is not an ideal expression. He admits that. But it does duty more or less adequately for Sanskrit and Pali word loku tara. Loka means world, it's just a world like this world, a sensuous world or a round form or formless. And Uttara is higher beyond. So transcendental is simply that which is above and beyond this world. So transcendental here, we talk about unconditioned. Transcendental is lokutara or chu shijian, sukteyang. So this transcendental is beyond this world. It is not above or beyond any spatial sense. So again, it's beyond this world. It doesn't mean it's beyond, outside of this world in a spatial sense. Not only in a sense that it is not conditioned. So I hope I'm making sense here. So the unconditioned here is beyond, because that's the only way we can, best way to really describe it. We're really limited by our language here. We can only communicate based on what we know, based on our consciousness. But we have to really don't become attached to the language that I'm using here. It's beyond all suffering, beyond transience, beyond the sense of the self, at least the fourth sense of the self. Right? Our fourth sense is the body. Here, our fourth sense is that we are made of the four elements and the consciousness. And it's above and beyond anything we can think of, or imagine, or conceive. So beyond our consciousness, our thinking. Contemplating it, the mind stalls and fails because it's really beyond ability to imagine what it is. That's why you can even contemplate it. You can imagine what it is. So it's a great blank before us, unconfined and unapprehensible plentitude. And this is, and then what I can translate is a state of being that is uncontrolled, but it's complete. Complete, not in the sense of compared to incomplete, but it's complete because it's of its perfection. So when we say that surely there's nothing beyond that, not higher than that. And as far as some schools of Buddhism are concerned, one cannot. But there are Mahayana say you can go even further than this that you can. So I mean, when you say infinity, to go beyond infinity doesn't make sense because infinity by definition is immeasurable. And so even if you have gone beyond infinity, you are still infinity by definition. Okay, so that's voidness of unconditioned, which is transcendental, as opposed to the conditioned, the reality that we are encountering day in, day out. Comments, questions? And then there's the great void. So the great void here is opposed to the different perspective of seeing this. But it really means nirvana in a sense, from a Mahayana perspective, that it is really mean, it refers to nirvana. The third sunyata, maha sunyata. Maha is great. Sunyata is void, so great void. It is the emptiness of the very distinction between conditioned and unconditioned, between the world, the Shijian, and transcendental, Chu Shijian, between samsara and nirvana. So there is this maha sunyata embraces within itself and all opposites, all distinction whatsoever. So really, there's no dichotomy, there's no distinction, no duality. And sunyata here means, again, voidness, conditionality. All things come back to conditionality, right? Ultimate, which is so-called ultimate truth. So all things, the conditions and unconditions are equally sunyata. They are all the same voidness, all the same emptiness, all the same great sunyata. So this maha sunyata, a great void, embraces itself within itself, all opposites and all distinction whatsoever. So there is no distinction. This is like the ultimate absence of dichotomy, duality. So according to the perfections of wisdom teachings, all things whatsoever, whether great or small, high or low, pure or impure, enlightened or unenlightened, all beings whatsoever are all of them the same unique, ineffable, absolute reality within which there are no distinctions whatsoever. So not that distinctions are wiped out or obliterated, but they are provisional, not final nor ultimate, meaning there's not permanent. There's not something called great that exists, great void that exists. It's great void because you got a point where there is no distinction between object and subject. There is no longer distinction between the cycle of life and birth and nirvana. But it shows us that our viewpoint might ultimately be. So in other words, this surpasses the mundane perceptions. Our mundane perceptions still uses language to try to perceive things. And when we say for example, like somebody who, let's say somebody's drinking hot coffee and we try and imagine what that temperature is, we go back to our experience of something that we can relate to, and that is still limited. So whenever that when we talk about sunyata, void, emptiness, we try to correlate that to something that we experience, which is mundane experience, and that is why it is difficult to receive it. Okay. All right. All right. Any comments so far? Okay. The last part I would like to share with you is the path of no return in this reality here. So we learn all these great concepts, but there's a difficulty of following through and continuing with our cultivation. Right? There's always a danger of, at the beginning, everybody's very excited about new things. We may have had that experience where we come to Buddhism very excited, learning about these concepts, and these doctrines seem very fascinating at first. And then we may have gone through periods of where we start to lose interest, whether it's life taking a toll on us, busy of life and work. But whatever happens, we go through these cycles. And sometimes we feel very invigorated, where we feel on top of the world, and we feel that these concepts make extremely good sense. And then there are times where we think we don't want to study them, and we just don't think they're of any value. And so we go through these cycles. And so this part of his book he's talking about is the gravitational pool, where we become we are being pulled between the conditioned and the unconditioned, the world that we so well know of, and the unconditioned that we aspire to become. And so we're being pulled, and sometimes the conditioned gravitational pull is so strong that we start to lose grip of the transcendental. Our aspirations, we no longer have that clear view of that aspirations, and we start to lose interest. And so he's talking about the pool that we're always in, and it's important not to recognize that we're being pulled by one side, and so that we know how to untie that and reduce the pull so that of the conditions, so that we can be gravitated towards the unconditioned. So to begin with, there's a gravitational pull of the conditions, and then there's a gravitational pull of the unconditioned. And at the beginning, when we have shown great interest in Buddhism, that we are being pulled by the unconditioned more, and we gravitated towards it. And so even though the unconditioned, we know it can pull us, but we know that the unconditioned gravitational pull is also there because we are gravitated, we are aspired towards that state of being. So it has to be there. There's no question about moving towards enlightenment at all, because that pull is there. It may be faint, but it's there. But there comes a crucial point at which the pull of the unconditioned or of enlightenment becomes stronger force. So that's what we want to be, is at the point where the pull from the unconditioned is stronger. 不退转. That's the point that we want to be, with a point of non-regression. So beyond this point, our spiritual progress will be assured, right? Stream enter. So there will be no danger of relapse. So this is a very important goal for us to strive for. And so that's the part right here that I'm talking about, is we want to be at a point where we are at a safe place of relapse, to fall back, from falling back. So it is said that the ultimate goal of Buddhism is enlightenment, Buddhahood, nirvana, or whatever that you call it. But really, these are only words. They are quite unable to convey to us an adequate idea of the nature for us to be attracted to it. It seems so far away. Buddhahood and nirvana, enlightenment, seems so far away. And for us to try to take a bite out of that is going to be very difficult. But we should take a smaller chunk, something more of an intermediate goal so that we can rely on step by step to get there. But we can set our sights on a more intermediate, more comprehensible, more accessible aim. Our goal is to reach the point of no return. Once we reach this point, enlightenment is in any case assured. Although the point of no return is within our reach, we still have to make great efforts for it. But even though we say that the point of no return, but we really need to put in initiative, take the initiative and make the first steps. We should not underestimate the power of gravitational pull of the conditioned. He gives an example. It is owing to the gravitational pull of the conditions that an artist stray away from his or her own vision, meaning give in. Somebody's putting a pressure. The artist wants to be creative, but then there is financial pressure, right? There's pressure from the patrons, the sponsors. You say you have to do this in a certain way, and so the artist is betraying his or her own vision. Because of this gravitational pull of the conditions, that religions lose any sense of their true mission. Right? It become merely a show, a custom, a tradition. Like all the Fa Hui, all the Dharma assembly is now just a show. They've lost their true missions for why they established the Buddhist order. Because of financial pressure, they have to create Dharma assembly and so forth, and whatever that. If they have activities with Dharma lectures where it's not attracting a lot of followers, but if the followers prefer Dharma assemblies, then they're going to switch over from lectures to Dharma assemblies, for example. So they've lost their sense of their true mission. And with this gravitational pull of the condition, that we sink down from the heights of meditation and even stop meditating altogether. So this gravitational pull of the condition is something that we should not think lowly of, because it is a very strong force and it can pull us away from our aspiration. So it's very important that we see this for ourselves, the working of this great force, right, in above all experience and in history, so we can learn from it, so that we don't face the pitfalls ourselves. Once we see it, once we realize how powerful it is, we wake up to the fact that we cannot afford to stop making an effort. So, 精进, right? We have to put in the effort, put in the efforts, put in diligence, because this force here is so strong that it can easily pull us back once we stop putting in the effort. Once we stop exerting ourselves, putting in the effort, the gravitational pull of the condition inexorably takes over. And before we know it, what has happened? We are back to where we started from. We spent decades of, let's say we spent decades of cultivation. And like Dr. Huang mentioned yesterday, this fear of this coronavirus. So we spent 6 decades, even 7 decades, studying Buddhism about selfless, about being fearless. But then this pandemic occurs, and then we start to feel fearful. Then we have just lost our way, we have regressed, right? So 20 years, 30 years, 50 years of cultivation. And now this situation occurs, and we are fearful for our lives. Then that's regression, right? So we have to be careful of this gravitational pull. Don't think so small of it, because its force is great. So we should not rest on our spiritual laurels. whatever that we have achieved, the compliments that we receive, the credentials that we have received, we should not rest on those accomplishments. We should always continue to progress. That's what he's saying here. So the point of no return in Buddhist scriptures is stream entry. The stream is the irresistible force of the unconditioned. So once you're in the stream, it takes you there. So that's why I'm. So stream entry is like the first fruition of sagehood, if you will. The beginning of it. That is called the initial point of no return. So we can imagine this being an image of a river, right? So once again, we are as though standing on the river bank. You have a river and you stand on the bank of the river, which represents conditioned existence. You're on this side of it. And you're trying to cross it to the other shore, nirvana. In this image of the unconditioned of nirvana represents the other shore, the other side of the river, right? You're trying to cross from one side to the other. You're now on this side of the river, you're on the conditioned reality. You're trying to get to the unconditioned. And so by the ocean towards which the river is flowing, so we want to go towards the unconditioned. So one could say that the distance from the point where we are, standing on the edge of the river, the bank of the river, corresponds to the first stage of the path, or the stage of morality, 持戒, 礼仪. So when we are about to take that step into the river to cross it, that represents 持戒, morality, precepts. Then the distance from the edge of the river to midstream corresponds to the second stage of the path, meditations. So the threefold study, right? 三学, 戒定慧, precepts, meditation, and wisdom. So 三好, 三老. Once we reach midstream, begin to feel the mighty force of the current flowing towards the ocean, right? So there's a stream flowing, we will feel the force of it. And we just have to abandon ourselves to it. In other words, we need to let go of the conditions. Sometimes we have fear of letting go, and the stream is pulling us, but then we're holding tight onto the conditioned reality. But for us to enter the stream, we have to let go of where we are so that we can go with the flow of the current. So we have to abandon the false self. This is the point of stream entry, where we let go. And it's not easy to let go. There's fear of losing our wealth. There's fear of losing our career. There's fear of losing decades of establishment. We spent our bare hands, right, creating our career, our enterprise. And for us to let go is very fearful. And so in the stream entry is that we're beginning to face less and less fear of letting go. And the distance from there to the ocean itself is the third stage, which is wisdom. So the image, the image of this river here is there is a Indian teacher who gave an example to illustrate the relations between grace and works. So just to level the playing field here, by grace, I mean tali, and works is tu li, so talik and tu. So grace is something that can help you move forward, but works is you have to put in the effort. So we must take the first steps, the initiative towards the unconditioned, right? Amitabha is not going to grab us and take us to the Western Pure Land, but we have to have the aspiration to be there. We have to be joyful in wanting to be there. We have to, at least we need to have the mindset. We may be limited in what we can do, but we have to have that mindset, that aspiration. Okay, so that's in this example. He's using two words. works and grace. So he's giving an illustration here. So he said that it is like rolling a boat right out to the center of the river, to midstream. The process of getting into the boat and rolling. So you have to let go of all that you have, let go of this land to get onto the boat. Because you have to abandon it to get into the boat, and you have to put in the effort to get there on the boat. So that's work that we have. That's represent works that we have to do. It is great difficulty in making progress. It's not easy to let go the decades of cultivation or establishments that we have. So once you are in the midstream, you can hoist the sail. You can raise your sail, the sail of your boat. And once you raise the sail, it will catch the breeze. The wind blows and it will take you. Okay? It will carry you up, or it will propel you forward. Then you can rest. You can put up your oars, and for no further effort is needed. All you need to do is to steer. The breeze carries you along. So very little effort. Once you're into the stream, you still have to put some effort. You have to raise the sail and just steer in the right direction. And this breeze here, which is you're not pushing the boat. Right now, you're on land, you have to put an effort to push the boat. But once you're in the right conditions with the water, and there's water stream, there's breeze, it's very easy to propel forward very quickly to our destination. And so this gravitational pull of the inconditioned for a stream enterer is like that. It represents the breeze, the grace that we can leverage to get to our destination. So if we are to take stream entry as our goal, how it's going to be attained? How do we get to the point of no return so that we don't regress? Buddha found many different ways of mapping out the journey to enlightenment. And subsequent Buddhist traditions has added new ways, right? Every time we establish something new, we share with other people, and past masters have done the same thing. They share their experience, their accomplishments, and so it morphs into so many different ways of getting there. So all of these different ways of describing the past, some make it particularly clear how the point of no return or the point of stream entry is to be recognized or attained. For example, just as we can say that the point of no return in terms of the threefold path, right? 三学, 三老好, 戒定慧, right? Precepts, meditations, and wisdom. Giới định tuệ. It's the point that which meditation shades into wisdom. So, and then in terms of the 12 links, 十二因缘, 十二因缘, then the point of no return is reached at the 8th stage, knowledge and visions of things as they really are. So that, in other words, that depends on what method. There are many ways of trying to get to the point of no return. But the point here is you want to get to that particular point, which is the point of no return. But one thing all these descriptions of the path have in common is that they are about the cultivation of positive spiritual qualities. In terms of breaking the fetters is what tie you down. So breaking the fetters, how does that work? There are 10 fetters that one can break to get to achieve enlightenment. One is self-view, doubt or indecisions, dependence on morals, rules, and religious observances, sensuous desire, and ill will, hatred. So the 10 fetters are broken down in this sutra, Samyojana Sutra, breaking down into 2 parts: the lower 5 and the upper 5. You can see here. Please, large enough. Okay. So these here are the lower 5. And then these are the higher 5 feathers. So breaking the first three again, self-view, doubt, and attachment to tradition. These fetters, once you break the first three, you become a stream entrant. You're now gotten to the point of, you say, no regression. Because you're in the stream will carry you to the destination eventually. It may take a long time, but eventually it'll get you there. So that from now onwards, one will be subject more to gravitational pull of the unconditioned than to gravitational pull of the conditioned. But they still have to put in effort, because they could, could they lose their way, Dr. Huang, if once they get into extreme enter? Is it possible that they could lose? Or the Buddha says, once you really have gotten to that point, you're in the stream already. There's no way that you could be at that level for a long period of time, but you will not regress to the lower realms. So that is for sure, that you will not encounter the sufferings in the lower realm, because you'll continue to cultivate skillful qualities. You continue to, you're not going to do bad deeds, evil deeds. Therefore, you will never encounter the lower three realms. So that's what it means. Is once you're in there, you see things so clearly that there's no way for you to do bad deeds. Just like we know that taking drugs, cocaine is bad. We don't have to be told that. But we're at a point where there's no way that I can be forced to smoke, for example. It brings me no benefits to smoke. Even if it makes me cool, but the benefit, I just don't see it enough. So I can say that I am at a point of no return in terms of smoking. I can rest assured that there is no way on earth that anybody can convince me to smoke, for example, because I've seen so clearly. And so I think that's what it means, like Dr. Huang is like, once you're in there, you see things so clearly, and you continue to provide the conditions of good qualities, skillful quality in your behavior, your thinking, your speech, that you will never have the conditions to regress and encounter suffering in the three lower realms of hell, hungry ghosts, and animal. So that's what it means, like that's the point of no return. The fourth and the fifth feathers is greed and anger, which is sensuous desire and ill will, as said to be particularly strong, and not breaking them, but just weakening them, one becomes what's called non-once returner. Right? Like Dr. Huang, they cannot get rid of their anger completely until they get to the third stage. But in second stage, at least they can contain the anger. They can contain the desire. So just becoming aware of it, not breaking the fetters, but just becoming aware of it. And once returner has gone well past the point of no return, and is even more strongly drawn by the unconditioned. So as the further into the stream that you are, the stronger the force of the unconditioned that's pulling you. Only one more birth as human being for those who have broken the fourth and the fifth fetters. In other words, they have one more life before they reach Arhat, Alahan, where they completely liberated. They'll be liberated from the cycle of life and death. So on actually breaking the fourth and fifth fetters, one becomes non-returner and reborn in the pure abodes. Abodes is the heaven in the realm of form. This is the heaven that they were born into. They will continue to cultivate there until they reach enlightenment. So non-returner, anagamant, is the third level of sagehood. So they are partially enlightened, who have cut off the first 5 chains that bind the ordinary mind. non-returner gains enlightenment directly from pure abodes without the necessity of another human birth. So they, in other words, from there, they not only are they enjoying the bliss of heaven realm, but from there they continue to progress until they reach enlightenment. So there's no way for them to come back to earth. They don't need to. So the five lower fetters, one binds to the plane of sensuous desire and the innermost circle of the gravitational pool. So these lower five desires are the strongest, like the core of our gravitational gravity, if you will, that pulls us. It's very dense and very strong. That's where it's the strongest. So if we can break those five, we're good to go. We are set. Then for the sixth and the seventh, they refer to the plane of form, which is 色界, sakye, which is even higher, where it's very, once we practice meditation, it's very attractive because it sucks us in, because that meditative bliss is in a way very addictive, and so that's why they get stuck. For those externalists who don't have the right goal, they get stuck in that meditative bliss. Once the five higher fetters are broken completely free, and they are completely free, one experiences only gravitational pull of the unconditioned, and there is no more rebirth. So such as an arhat, alohan, or alahan, so they are no longer conditions for rebirth. They call the worthy one or holy one, 应供, 恩公. So at least in this at least is the traditional way of putting it in Theravada Buddhism. So that's how they see that's an example of definition of the point of no return. As we have seen in the full realization of sunyata, one sees that there is ultimately no distinction between samsara and nirvana. So the journey from one to the other is just a matter of speaking. So that's Theravada is, Mahayana is seeing there's no difference between samsara and nirvana. So it depends on the schools and the interpretations that we have different ways of getting there. Mahayana Buddhists would say that basically it's the same process in terms of arising the will to enlightenment. Right? Your yuan, your will, nguying, to enlightenment. By yuan, your vow, your will. And the taking of Bodhisattva vow, emphasizing that to move towards enlightenment is not just one's own sake, but involves indeed is inseparable from great altruism, 无我, 不我. And so while they perhaps don't give us the full picture, they can be very useful to think in terms of breaking the fetters. So these 5 fetters, these 10 fetters, the more that you break them, the higher into the stream that you are, and the higher of a transcendental state of being that you accomplish. So breaking, which is synonymous with stream entry. So again, self-view, and then he goes into the details of each one. There's self-view, which is a fixed view, experiencing of selfhood as being fixed and changeable ultimate. We need to break that in order to enter the stream. This is me, I'm always like this. You're accepting the fact that I'm angry. People should tolerate that. So you are already accepting the fact that you have identified yourself as anger, and there's nothing that you can do to change it. So that's self-view. So it's a fixed view of ourselves or others. Then there's doubt. So doubt here, or indecision, is not intellectual sense that you don't understand the concept, but doubt in terms of commitment. For you to commit to this path of study, you're holding back. Well, there's really no reason for holding back. You're afraid to put in your time and effort, your commitment to this path. So the gravitational pull of the condition is at work with vengeance. So it's pulling you back. right? So lots of people who are interested in spiritual life, but they won't commit themselves to it. I'll give you an example, and please don't take me for it, is that we want to have compassion, but some people, they want to practice compassion, but they can't commit to a vegetarian lifestyle. That's an example. So don't hold me, or just do whatever that you think is helpful. Then some people who they can't have vegetarian diet because of their conditions. Maybe because the body, the conditions require certain proteins, certain from meat. So that's understandable. But if we have all the conveniences, that shouldn't be, because we cannot let go of our taste buds. And so therefore, you can see that the condition, the gravitational pull of the condition is pulling us, and it's giving us doubt. We're not fully committed. That's just an example. So don't think about vegetarian and stop studying Buddhism. That's not the whole point. I'm just making an illustration. And the second is attachment to moral or religious rules. So depends on the rules, depends on religious rule observances. But of course, we should, this is here, is to cling to become attached to ethical rules, and not that the practices are wrong in any way, but the problem comes if we become dependent on them too much. We're saying that this is the way to do, this is the only way to practice, this is the only way to bow to the Buddha, this is the only way to do ceremony, and that becomes attachment. Or when people are not vegetarian, you become upset. You start to use this ruler, and you now become an eyesore of other people, right? You say, yeah, Buddhism is about compassion, therefore you should be vegetarian. No, I mean, but because if we become attached to that view, then that's not good, right? Now, even though it sounds very compassionate, but it's a fetter that ties you down to that view, because not everybody can take on vegetarian diet, and it's not that you eat vegetarian diet that you become a Buddha. You know what I'm saying? So we have to take that balance. Religious people tend to become trapped in religion itself. They treat it as not as a means to an end, but an end in itself. That's where it becomes a problem. Let me have a few more minutes to complete this. So let us. So we should have our pujas. Pujas means Fa Hui, our Dharma assemblies, our Fab Hui. And our meditation, our sutras, our texts. But they are only of value to the extent that they lead us in the direction of enlightenment. So we should always ask ourselves, is what I'm doing really helping me in the direction of enlightenment? Or the Fa Hui or the Fab Hui, Dharma assemblies that I'm part of, are they helping me in any way? Right? And some do, because when we come here, we interact with people. That's how we learn about ourselves. Because how we perceive people is how we are. When we see people as angry, agitated, then we are inside have some sort of agitation. Until we interact with people, it's very difficult to bring out our true self. So we can't stay at home alone, and think that we are fine. Right? It's not, because nobody has agitated us. That's why we are okay. We have no anger. But once we come into interactions with other people, and we want people to do a certain way, people push back, and how do we behave? How do we act? In that case, if you cause rise to mindfulness, and you say, oh, I recognize my anger, I should stop that, then you have elevated yourself, and that's a good Dharma assembly to be part of. But if you're here and you become attached and you're rising and people are jealous, and maybe not be a good environment to be in. So don't be a hamster in its wheel, spinning around, put in a lot of effort, but not put in a lot of effort, but not going anywhere. Right? We put in a lot of effort, putting up a Dharma assembly, but it's all about attachment, trying to preserve our own view. So it's not enough to declare that one's a Buddhist. It's not even enough to to practice meditation every day, or read Sutra every day. But the point is, are we getting nearer to enlightenment? Are we getting nearer to our goal? Are we making progress? So we should be always asking ourselves those questions. Until we have broken them, we're subject to their constraint. The gravitational pull will always challenge us. So look out for those times when you feel like giving up on the spiritual path because we're afraid, because we don't know where it's taking us. And we will need to notice when we are just going through emotions of spiritual practice. It's part of it. There are bumps in the road, but we should not stop the journey because we encounter a couple of bumps. So breaking these fetters, the 3 fetters, we will be able to get to a stream entry level. And it's a practical goal. As opposed to enlightenment and nirvana, which is very far away, we should first focus ourselves to at least the point of no return, right? That's what he's trying to say. All right, so one last comment. As one does so, one will feel the gravitational pull of the unconditioned more and more powerfully. One will, in fact, glimpse of the unconditioned. We have an understanding. We can feel the force of the unconditioned, and we know it's there. We may not see it, but we know it's there, and we should continue. All right, are there any comments before we end? Okay, let's do merit dedication. Okay, could you please join your palms? Together we recite. May the merits and virtues accrue today adorn the Buddha Pure Lands, repay 4 types of kindness above, and aid those suffering in the past below. May those who see and hear of this bring forth the resolve for the Bodhi-mind. When this retribution body is complete, together we shall meet in the land of ultimate bliss. If you could please rise and we bow to the Buddha 3 times to show our respect. First bow. Second bow. And third bow. Amida Society.